Hello and welcome to this round 11 of Grand Prix Providence. We're going to get a chance to look at the teams of Andrew Funkhouser, Deanna Dang and William Craddock against Andrew Baeckstrom, Corey Burkhart, and in the middle there, Martin Juza, the number 6 by his name, indicating that he's currently the 6th ranked player in the world, Hall of Fame elect Martin Juza. And we're going to start off on his match against Deanna Dang, find out what it is that they're working with here with their second sealed deck of the weekend. Day 2, everyone builds a new team sealed with 12 packs, and we get to see a little bit about what they're working with. Deanna on the play there.
Martin, one of the premium limited players of all time. He travels to all these GPs, and he frequently spikes them.
Yeah, I mean, it's the sort of thing that this is what Martin Juza does. Like, his standard weekend is trying to find somewhere to play a GP and immediately getting things going. First creature on the board. Interesting to see a vampire in red-white, but if you're going to pick a vampire to play, Adanto Vanguard, a great one, 1/1 for 2, but then when it attacks, +2 power, and you can always pay 4 life to give it indestructible until the end of turn. So a nice little attacker, fitting with the red-white plan, even if normally we think of vampires as being more black-white.
Yeah, one of the best vampires in this format. Again, we were talking about how it's very race-oriented yesterday, and Adanto Vanguard as a 3-power attacker that is just very, very hard to kill, combines very nicely with combat tricks. Your opponent doesn't want to block it because life is a resource. You don't mind paying 4, 8, sometimes even 12 life if your opponent's going to throw some creatures under the bus.
And if we're talking about premium white cards in this set, Territorial Hammerskull definitely qualifying. 3 mana, 2/3. The stat's not the important bit on that one, really, though. The fact that every time it attacks, you get to tap at a creature an opponent controls, that means that blocking very, very difficult once the Hammerskull starts getting into the red zone. Frenzied Raptor on the other side of things from Juza means that he's looking to be attacking rather than blocking anyway. And it'll be interesting to see how these two red-white decks face off against each other, given that they have kind of a similar plan.
Yeah, and even though Deanna was on the play here, because she started a turn effectively slower, only having a 3-drop to Martin's 2 and 3, she might be tempted to hold back the Hammerskull unless she thinks she can race it. But Martin has 7 power on offense, just represented on the board currently. He's playing red-white. There are plenty of tricks. We saw many Vampire Zeals yesterday. There are also things like Sure Strike.
And now we have Captain Lannery Storm coming down there, the 2/2 with haste. When it attacks, generating treasure tokens and able to attack with impunity thanks to the team-up of the battering Territorial Hammerskull. And even a trick there, a lightning strike, using it in the middle of combat, because when that treasure got sacrificed for mana, it meant that Lannery Storm got +1 power. So in total, that an attack for 5, along with a removal spell for the creature threatening the most damage on Martin Juza's side of the battlefield.
Yeah, that was a great turn for Deanna. That's one way that she can turn the tides here. I was just talking about how she might have to go more defensive, but not only did she have a haste creature, she had a haste creature that produced an extra mana, gained some power, and was able to kill Martin's largest creature, like you mentioned.
Well, one way to follow up is just to simply start playing multiple spells in a turn. Now that we have Raptor's Companion and that Bishop Soldier there, the 2/2 lifelinker, it certainly doesn't seem like things are going to get too bogged down if they don't need to. The most important creature on the battlefield to me now is really that Territorial Hammerskull, because it means that, firstly, it's got the biggest toughness. It can potentially get in fights with a lot of these creatures okay. Also, it can mean that blocking really difficult.
Yeah, Deanna for sure gonna pivot on that Territorial Hammerskull, maybe using it on defense at some point. But Martin, again, has that Adanto Vanguard that is just continuously attacking for 3 damage ever since turn 3.
And asking the question here as to whether or not Martin Juza wants to secure a block and maybe a trade here, but with 5 mana up, lots of potential tricks that Deanna Dang could be threatening here.
It's always interesting to see when 2 aggressive strategies pair up like this. When do you turn on the brakes? When does one person realize they have to change from the aggro to the defensive mode? Conversely, when does the defensive player realize that they have to go offensive?
Yeah, I think that shifting gears is one of the most challenging things about playing aggressive decks, either recognizing you have to pump the brakes or knowing when to go from a relatively passive role to an active one. Well, Deanna now working very much simply on the dinosaur plan. One of the bigger dinosaurs that you're likely to see in the set coming down here.
Yeah, pretty awkward, though. It's not great right now. It can't block by itself, of course.
Yeah, the Bone Horde Crest has to have a friend with it. At the moment, it's got one of the best friends around.
Oh, my.
But if you're looking for one of the best dinosaurs around, period, Charging Monstrosaur is just the most aptly named creature in the set. Absolutely monstrous. 5 power, 5 toughness, trample, haste, 5 mana. Always, I think, right up there as one of the top cards that you want in any red deck in this format.
Yeah, certainly one of the best uncommons, if not the best uncommon. Definitely better than quite a few of the rares and even mythics in this set. And Martin just hit in for 11 points of damage.
Yeah, it's just been really, really telling how haste has impacted on this matchup. We had Captain Lannery Storm getting in for a little bit of surprise damage, but that's nothing compared to what Charging Monster represents. And then even once this haste is out the window, Trample means that the big old body coming across into the red zone is able to remain a pertinent threat turn after turn.
Yeah, I mean, so in your position, if you're Deanna, you can't think, well, how do I play around Unfriendly Fire, Lightning Strike? Currently, you can't unless you have some way to gain some life. Your position is, how do I survive now and then turn the corner?
Charging Monstrosaurs on both sides of the battlefield now. We may be seeing some Monstrosaur on Monstrosaur violence. Though Bonded Horncrest, of course, also trades fairly well with a Charging Monstrosaur. The difference is that Deanna Dang, only 3 points of life to work with, has to manage them very carefully indeed, whereas Martin Juza, if he takes a hit somewhere, that's not necessarily the end of the world.
Yeah, any removal spell here would have one for Martin. Presumably he doesn't have it, as I think he would have already seen it cast by now. So he's going to be jockeying for a little bit of position, seeing if he has any good trades. Now remember, the Charging Monstrosaur on Martin's, well, both Charging Monstrosaurs have Trample, but Deanna actually has some pretty good blocks, as 2 of her creatures are 5/5s as well.
Yeah, maybe that Martin here elects to go with the Pterodon Knight that he has in hand and defer winning the game with big attacks until a future turn.
Yeah, so I think Martin here is just weighing the options of, if it's correct to attack, get some creatures off the board so that Deanna can't somehow win the game next turn. It looks like he had a Tillinolly's Knight as well, in addition to that Pterodon Knight, so he knows he's still going to have lethal threats the following turn. I like this attack a lot. Get some power off of Deanna's board. You're already in firm position. All of your creatures are still lethal.
And at 15 life, knowing that there's... Yeah, see, Deanna Dang here, smart block, putting both of her 5/5s in the way, basically to make sure that a piece of removal doesn't let Trample finish the game off. And then Pterodon Knight, after combat, another fresh lethal threat, 3/3, currently flying, thanks to the fact that that Raptor Companion is hanging out with the Knight.
Yeah, it must not have been a Tillinolly's Knight in his hand. I think he would have cast it if that was the case. But, again, Pterodon Knight still lethal. That Raptor Hatchling doing some good work. Oh!
The full mirror, Pterodon Knight on both sides of the battlefield. Deanna Dang, the rearguard action here from her, working out okay, but each and every turn, Martin Juza in the enviable position with a red-white aggressive deck of being able to pose additional questions of Deanna Dang's defenses.
Yeah, that Bonded Horncrest is doing some good work for Martin here. Oh, sorry, for Dang here. putting a big stop in Martin's attacks.
So this is an interesting attack here. It is representing lethal, so will prompt a block from somewhere.
This is a great attack from Martin, as the previous turn, Dang had the Charging Monstrosaur to just, jump in front of the Danto Vanguard. Her other creatures now are only X3s, so it's going to have to be a trade. Remember that Horncrest has to block with an additional creature, so Martin has some life to work with. He can pay 4, keep the Adanto Vanguard, and still eat the 2/3.
And that's exactly what he does. Goes to 11, takes down one of the more problematic creatures on the battlefield in the Territorial Hammerskull. And just gradually eking out value, gradually killing off more creatures on the other side, though it looks like another Pterodon Knight may come down for Deanna Dang soon enough. But even after combat there, Martin Juza able to add another... I mean, at this point, it feels like almost all threats in his deck are lethal threats, but worth noting is another lethal threat that's come down for him there. The Frenzied Raptor, 4/2. Raptor Companion coming along, and Tillinolly's Knight for Deanna Dang.
Yeah, Deanna's still in that unenviable position of having to chump block the Adanto Vanguard. If she could find a creature with 4 toughness, I think she would be okay. provided Martin doesn't find any type of removal or combat trick. But for now, all she can do is double block the Adanto Vanguard with the Bonded Horncrest and one of her other creatures. But
I mean, if Martin jams all of his creatures into the red zone here, they're all lethal, and he's got an overlap effectively of one creature, right? Because the Bonded Horncrest... Oh, sorry. When it has the block alone, you can split your blockers.
Correct.
Yeah. My apologies. So we are just seeing the Vanguard coming in, and once again, we will have something going under that bus.
I think after this weekend, people will realize just how good Adanto Vanguard is. If you thought it was good, it's probably better. If you already thought it was great, it's probably even better still.
Yeah, it's a funny one because historically, paying life for things has always been one of those things where at first blush people get a little bit leery about it, and very frequently, because until you've lost your last point of life, it is all just a resource. We see people sort of getting value from being able to use that life for something in the meantime.
Yeah, Martin's actually done more damage to himself this game.
Yeah, he's done himself 12?
I think just 8, but still, again, life as a resource working out well here. If Dan can't find something, well, she's already facing down 5 lethal threats.
Yeah, there would need to be a whole bunch of things working out for Dang to get this working. I mean, I guess something like a fiery cannonade would actually deal with all of the dinosaurs on the battlefield and mean that she would be able to fly in.
Sure.
But as things stand, Deanna Dang did not have it, so Martin Juza picking up the first game. And worth noting, when you look at the scoreboard, actually Andrew Baeckstrom and Corey Burkhart have also picked up their first games. We've got some synchronized magic going on here, a little bit of shuffling, and the players just discussing their potential sideboarding options going into game 2. The way that the matches work in these team-sealed formats is that it's not just about any one pairing of players. 2 members of an individual team need to win their matches in order to collectively win the series and get the match win, as it were, going forward. Each of these teams currently at 9-1. So they picked up, I believe they each picked up 1 loss yesterday, which means that so far today they've shown that their deck's working out all right.
Yeah, we think we had 1 undefeated team as of yesterday, but 9-1 certainly a very respectable record.
Yeah, that's kind of where you want to be at this stage. Because you're cutting to a top 4, the records end up getting a little bit tight in order to try and make it in. So it's certainly something that you would much rather keep as low a loss record for as long as possible, so that at least your tiebreakers get that much better, because tiebreakers could prove very important here in
absolutely.
Providence.
And remember, we only have 5 rounds of sealed today versus what would normally be in like a single player event, 6 rounds. Now, these are new sealed decks than the ones they were playing yesterday. For some, maybe a welcome card pool, but who knows? I
mean, I would say that for almost all the teams that have made it into day 2 with a reasonable shout at making top 8, they probably would have been okay with keeping the same decks. It does, of course, mean, that teams that played each other yesterday can play against decks. They've got different decks. That kind of works out. And it will be interesting to see if a lot of the trends that we saw yesterday end up playing out again today. The biggest trends that we saw in team sealed building were it's very, very easy to lean on tribal synergies when you're opening 12 packs. If you've got a bunch of cards that have the word dinosaur somewhere in their text box, the word vampire, the word merfolk, the word pirate somewhere in there, it's much more likely that you're going to be able to piece together something with them, where we may well see the exact opposite when we get to our top 4 team drafts, because that is notoriously a format where players are trying to cut cards from those that are sat next to. So we may see some very, very different decks in the knockout stages of our competition as players aim to try and get something going in the face of some pretty persistent hate. But it looks like our match on table A at the far end of with Andrew Baeckstrom and Funkhouser is all kicked off, and here we have, well, if we had the red-white mirror in the middle seat, it looks like we might have the Merfolk mirror here on table 1. Baeckstrom picking up the first game and seeing that he's now on the draw, having to face down, well, Exali's Diviner there. It's explored, it has found a creature, but it may be that if Funkhouser's looking for land, that he chooses to push that one. think I did spy one more land in hand. So as it turns out, he does choose to keep Stormfleet Aerialist on top. There's the Exali's Diviner. A 1/4 for 2 mana. A pretty happy place to be.
Yeah, Exali's Diviner has really impressed me. I wasn't very high on the card when the set first came out. I guess it came out really recently, but when the first set came out, I wasn't very high on the card. But you know what? As an 0/3, it blocks a lot of the low drops in this format. And if you hit the Explorer and give it that +1/+1, well, we can see it here, just kind of stopping that 2/1. There are plenty of 3-power creatures that also blocks. You're just getting some value. Can enable what we see here, Raid very easily because it's very hard to block, or at least profitably block a 4 toughness creature early on.
So we've seen Baeckstrom playing first a Shipwreck Looter, but no Raid there, and indeed a 2/1 that can't really get involved in many fights. Follows up with a Water Trap Weaver to tap down the Stormfleet Aerialist of Andrew Funkhouser, but Funkhouser having the early run of the green here does get down a Deeproot Champion. A relatively unimpressive looking 1/1 for 2 initially, but any spells can fairly rapidly make that champion large and in charge in this red zone.
Yeah, if I had to guess, I would imagine Andrew stuck off his green mana for now.
Yeah, not exactly where he wants to be, certainly. Meanwhile, Funkhouser, a relatively straightforward mix of mana, and we got a big rare coming down here. Interesting, not quite sure how good it is in Limited, but certainly something to think about for Constructed. Kapala, Warden of Waves. So a 3-mana 2/2 legendary Merfolk wizard, making spells your opponent cast that target your Merfolk cost 2 more, and abilities your opponents activate that target a Merfolk you control cost 2 more. So if Andrew Baeckstrom was kind of going for the Voltron plan, some have called it the Boggles plan of Merfolk, which is making a scary threat that is difficult for your opponent's target, Kapala means that pretty much your entire team gets a bit fiddly to target.
Yeah, I like Kapala in these Merfolk decks because a lot of the time you're adding extra 1/1 counters via Jade Guardian, River Herald's Boon. Maybe you're suiting up one of your Merfolk with 1 with the Wind. You're kind of going all in a sense a lot of the time, and this just stops a lot of the removal, or it makes it harder for your opponent to play that removal spell. In the Boggle, or not in the Boggles mirror, the Merfolk mirror in this instance, things like Run Aground, Perilous Voyage, Depths of Desire, those are all very, very prevalent as well. So
it's an interesting one. I think that in this exact matchup, Kapala might not be quite as impactful as perhaps against a deck with more straightforward red and black removal spells. But that said, Kapala still a solid body. I can't imagine siding her out just because of concerns like that. As things stand, though, the biggest problem that Baeckstrom has is Baeckstrom had no flyers going on, even though the flyer that he's thrown down, that Shaper Apprentice, 2/1 for 2 with flying because he controls other Merfolk, not quite able to tussle with the creatures on the other side of the battlefield. Stormfleet Aerialist, a 2/3, just the right numbers to be able to carry on hitting the red zone.
Yeah, for sure. Oh boy.
Carnage Tyrant. We didn't see it in the feature match area at all yesterday, but that's not because no one was playing it. It just happened to work out that way. The big mythic, can't be countered, 7/6 trample hexproof. If we're talking about the go big Boggles plan, I don't know whether or not we count Carnage Tyrant in that same hexproof camp, but does the job. 7/6 can't be countered, trample hexproof on its own, a great path to victory. And we also see here that Andrew Funkhouser able to follow up very, very quickly indeed, getting even more creatures on the battlefield, and in this case, getting to pump his team a little bit, thanks to that Vineshaper Mystic. So
yeah,
a +1/+1 counter on 2 of his Merfolk when he played it.
Andrew's deck looking like it's just functioning on all cylinders here. Carnage Tyrant is so hard to deal with. The hexproof is just one of the most powerful abilities that you can have in Limited. I mean, it's a 7/6 trample, even with, not even considering the hexproof. Andrew for sure is going to have some kind of tricks in his deck. Whether or not he has any in his hand currently, that's hard to say. But if Andrew wants to deal, if Baeckstrom, in this case, I guess they're both Andrew. If Baeckstrom wants to deal with that Carnage Tyrant, he's going to have to make some sort of sacrifice of a multi-block. And then if, Funkhouser has crashed the Ramparts or even just a River Herald's Boon to give it +1/+1, that might be enough to 3-for-1 Baeckstrom and end the game.
Well, Windstrider coming down, enabling a block on the Stormfleet Aerialist. The slightly scary thing for Andrew Baeckstrom, not that he necessarily knows it, is that there is a copy of River Herald's Boon in hand for Andrew Funkhouser here. So that enables him to put a counter on a Merfolk, a counter on a non-Merfolk, and indeed another counter on his Deeproot Champion. So it's as it turns out, Andrew Funkhouser, this is a very safe set of attacks for him. He knew that he was going to be able to do some crazy stuff.
This is disgusting.
That enough to just have Baeckstrom picking up his cards. He's not winning that one. And Andrew Funkhouser getting the first set of points on the board for his team in this round 11 matchup. Is now 1-1 between the two Andros, and we're going to get a chance to jump across and see some more magic from one of our other tables. The other matches currently still 1-0 in the favour of the team of Baeckstrom, Juza, and Burkhart.
I would imagine William Craddock and Corey Burkhart are both on black-white vampires, just given what we've seen of the other two.
Well, ask and you shall receive. You're close. We've actually got blue-black pirates by the looks of things for William Craddock. He's already played a contract killing, but I guess that there's a vampire sub-theme going on there as well, because...
You see a Sanctum Seeker on the top of his library.
Yeah, that Explore there revealing kind of a nice one. It's interesting the way that these things work out, that often you're almost inevitably going to have a little bit of overlap between tribes. Pious Interdiction here, dealing with the big 4/4 lifelinker, the Queen's Agent, that got to do that exploring. Queen's Agent, a card that I'm gradually warming up to. Just a 4/4 lifelink body, as it turns out, is pretty hefty in a lot of these matchups. But speaking of lifelink, Corey Burkhart with those 3 vampire tokens from Call to the Feast already in play, and at some point one of them might even pick up a sword and represent a 3/2 lifelinker.
Yeah, I think people see Queen's Agent as a 6-mana 3/3 lifelink. Sometimes it explores and draws you a card, sometimes it gets that 1/1 counter, but they just feel like it's a too much of a cost, right? It's very expensive for seemingly a small body, but lifelink is huge in limited. I mean, we see cards like Bishop's Soldier, just a premium 2-drop, even though it's just a 2/2 lifelinker. So I think Queen's Agent is going to go up in a lot of people's minds.
All right, so William Craddock here on 5 life, back against the wall, and Corey Burkhart on just a huge amount of life, 27 life to work with, thanks to all of that lifelink. And while, yes, we do see Sanctum Seeker coming down here, that means that there can be some drains on Corey Burkhart's life total during attacks, the 3/4, that whenever a vampire you control attacks, each opponent loses a life and you gain a life, and they do stack up quite nicely. Right now, William Craddock only has the 1 vampire that can attack, and that being the Sanctum Seeker itself.
Right. Yeah, Corey's in great position. I was mentioning it yesterday in our very last feature match between Mike Sigrist and his round 9 opponent, but Mike was able to just buffer his life total with all of the 1/1 life-linking vampires. Now, that was a great end to the match. Of course, we saw the run aground on the Sanctum Seeker in round 9 to finish it off. But again, if Corey even starts falling behind, he just has so much life to work with to draw out of it.
Yeah, gradually getting things going here. Even when there's, a bounce spell here, a removal spell there for what's going on for Corey Burkhart. He's got the Pirate's Cutlass there that gradually means that he gets to turn even the lowliest of 1/1 life-linking vampires into a bit of a threat. And then when he actually draws threats, things get all the more out of hand. We see Adano Vanguard again coming down here. The Vanguard, we saw it doing good work for Martin Juza. Looks like there's been a little bit of a split of the Vanguards, a few players wanting them in that team. And that the kind of split that you don't necessarily see every team making. That will have been a tricky choice for that team, figuring out how to split premium 2-drops when you got 2 aggressive white decks.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very great thing to point out, Tim. The Adanto Vanguard would seemingly be better, or at least well-suited in a dedicated vampire deck like Corey has.
Wow! Sorry, I have to interrupt you here because we have a very potent splash that's just come down. Tishana, Voice of Thunder, out of a blue-black deck, enabled by Treasure. I am a gigantic fan of using Treasure to help splash Tishana, Voice of Thunder. In some respects, Tishana, a card that doesn't necessarily fit as well in Merfolk as it does in some of the other decks in the format. 1 contract killing and you can cast this one, and when you do, now we have William Craddock drawing a crazy amount of cards, and this is the kind of play that he needed to get him back in the game.
Oh, absolutely. He's tapped out for this turn, so it's going to be important for Corey to really utilize this opportunity while William's pretty much tapped out. But if William gets to untap, he's just going to have so many resources to pull back into this game.
Get in a little attack. That will do a drain before anything else. And that might be about as good as it gets for William Craddock. You get Direfleet Hoarder also coming down after Tishana. The little consolation prize after you've made your biggest threat. But you know what? When you draw that many cards in one turn, even if you're down 6 life to 23, this is how comebacks happen.
Absolutely. And, I was watching you draft earlier with a black-white deck. You were splashing Tishana off of 2 contract killings, so this is just...
I love it.
Reminiscent.
It's my favorite deck in the format now, is the the deck that uses Treasure to splash Tishana, and even now that a contract killing comes from Corey Burkhart to deal with the big mythic, potentially the damage already done, drawing a whole mess of additional cards may be enough that William Craddock can get back in this game. You can see there he's got nearly a full grip, and it will mean that it's a lot trickier for Corey Burkhart to get through those final 6 points of damage.
Yeah, but again, this is a great turn for Corey, though. He needed to capitalize on William being tapped out for that Tishana and the Dire Fleet Hoarder. He has plenty of 1/1 tokens. The only good blocker that William has is that Desperate Castaways right now. So we'll see him try to push in some amount of damage here.
Yeah, just sending. I mean, there's so much lifelink going on here that it really is a very low-pressure attack from Corey. You know, if this all goes wrong and then there's a big swing back, the swing's not going to be that big, really. And on 6 life, William Craddock having to throw some bodies in the way.
Yeah, and on the face of it, William taking 4 damage here. Corey gaining 5 life rather.
And any trick here could just close it. And with this game, it would be the match because Corey Burkhart already game up. Martin Juza has won 2 games to 0 in the red-white mirror over Deanna Dang. Andrew Baeckstrom and Andrew Funkhouser still battling it out, looking how their game 3 is going if we find that this one goes to a game 3 also.
All right, the dust settles. And now Corey only needs to find some more ways to drain the last few points from William.
Yeah, just 2 points left to deal. And an attack here from Craddock, I kind of like it. It gets him to drain for another point, and the life gain here almost more important than the damage he's dealing to Burkhart, because 28, a massive pile of damage that he's going to need to deal. But every time that he gets to get a swing in with that Sanctum Seeker, it does buffer his life total a little bit. And an Air Elemental, that is a sizable body, which will at least mean that Corey has to get something going. Contract killing will do it. Even the treasure means that he can get to equip his Adanto Vanguard.
Yeah, if William doesn't have a bounce spell here, which I'm going to assume he has either a bounce or a removal spell, he is going to be dead on board as Corey can equip up the 1/1 lifelinker and attack with 2/3 power creatures.
The classic Air Elemental being revealed there.
Nice.
Been reprinted a few times and has basically just always been good. Pirate's Cutlass there going on the lifelinking vampire. Oh, we have a trick.
Vraska's Contempt.
More life gain for William Craddock. He finds ways to just bob and weave. And the perfect answer to Adanto Vanguard, because it exiles the creature. It means that there's no opportunity to pay 4 life to give indestructibility. Vraska stepping in and helping out there when William Craddock was very much on the ropes.
Yeah, and now I think this game is firmly in William's control. He's going to untap with that Sanctum Seeker again, get in for 3 more points of damage, and then 1 life drain. Corey does still have a good number of cards in his hand, but something like Dark Nourishment won't even do it anymore because of that extra life gain from all of his cards.
Direfleet Interloper, a nice one, coming in as a 3/3 thanks to that Explore with Menace, with currently no creatures on the battlefield for Corey Burkhart. Yeah, I like the way that this is shaping up for William Craddock here. His life total creeping up rather than down, and he's now got the kind of threats that are potentially going to be able to get him out of this game. So much mana that he's going to be able to cast everything that he draws, but as things happen, if you're going to have to play one threat, a Deathless Ancient for Corey Burkhart, 4/4 flyer that if he ever ends up with lots of vampires in play, he can return. Wow, contract killings all around here. Clutch contract killing for William Craddock. Just since he cast that Tishana, drew so many cards, he's been able to just piece together some much, much more powerful turns than what Corey Burkhart's been able to get going on.
Yeah, he actually drained for 2 points of life this turn, 1 from the Sanctum Seeker attacking, and 1 from that Skymarch Bloodletter.
Yeah, the Bloodletter, another threat, and it means that now when he's attacking, his Sanctum Seeker will be draining for 2 because that's another vampire on the battlefield. Territorial Hammerskull. All right, 2 creatures. This is kind of where Corey Burkhart needed to be. It means that he can potentially double block that Menace Pirate.
Yeah, we saw that Skybladed Legion quite a few turns ago from Corey's hand. It was bounced previously, and he opted to run out the Adanto Vanguard instead.
Is this another contract killing?
Oh my.
There have been so many contracts drawn in this game.
At least 4, 2 from each side, maybe more.
Wow.
And a Vanquish the Weak.
This is apparently, I would guess, the only black deck that the team of Funkhouser, Dang, and Craddock are playing, and they opened a lot of removal.
Yes.
Vanquish the Weak and Contract Killing in a single turn, clearing a path, and meaning that William Craddock there, able to take it back after what appeared to be just an insurmountable board from Corey Burkhart, and the turning point in that game had to be Tishana.
Oh, absolutely. Drawing, 5 extra cards and being able to untap with that extra mana and cards the following turn just really let him stabilize.
So now we're going to get a chance to see whether or not Andrew Funkhouser can continue the good work that William Craddock's been doing and force it to a deciding game at the bottom of our matchup here. This is the Merfolk Mirror, so we have Jade Guardian, a Deeproot Champion, and the 2-1 flyer in play here for Andrew Funkhouser. On the other side of things, it's Jade Guardians all around.
Yeah, if we didn't see enough hexproof in the form of Carnage Tyrant in the previous game, well, now we have 3 Jade Guardians.
Yeah, this is going to be a pretty non-interactive game in some respects. Shaper Apprentice, the flyer that's in play there for Andrew Funkhouser. 2-1. As long as he controls another Merfolk, it will be able to head to the air. Again, Andrew Baeckstrom, mono-coloured. This is not the way that the Merfolk decks want to be, but at least he's got 5 lands, only 3 for Funkhouser. Both players with mana problems. Let's see which one's going to be able to navigate those waters most easily.
All right, Andrew Funkhouser's tapped out here, so this double block could be a little bit problematic. Baeckstrom, if he has even just a Crash the Ramparts, is going to be able to get a nice 2 for 2.
And it looks like that's exactly the way that he's drawn it up. So now we've got... Wow. We had a 3-3 and a 2-1 on the battlefield. That 2-1 now not flying because Shaper Apprentice does not have any friends to work with. But then a follow-up of Kamina's Speaker there for Andrew Baeckstrom. Almost always a 2-2 for 1 in these Merfolk decks because all it needs is another Merfolk or an island. In this case, bizarrely, Andrew doesn't have any islands, but as it turns out, there's still a Jade Guardian to mean that it is getting that +1/+1 bonus.
Yeah, I love that Crash the Ramparts from Andrew Baeckstrom there. Even though he is 2 for 2ing himself, his creature is still dying. The creatures that Funkhouser had were very problematic and could threaten to be larger later in the game. A Jade Guardian, of course, has hexproof, so if he were to equip it up or add more counters to it, it could get very, very large and problematic. Deeproot Champion, also very much an issue. Funkhouser, though, tapped out, so Baeckstrom knew it wasn't going to gain any surprise 1/1 counters there.
Now, Funkhouser passed having just played a land, so he's up to 4 lands now, but no play. I did spot a River Herald's Boon in his hand, though, and potentially that one could mean that attacks here from Baeckstrom, if he wants to get greedy, might end up a little messy for him, because that's 2 instant speed +1/+1 counters that Funkhouser can start throwing around.
Yeah, and Baeckstrom will realize that Funkhouser could have many things here. Run aground, River Herald's Boon. On the bright side, the River Herald's Boon wouldn't allow his Shaper Apprentice to eat the Jade Guardian, so Baeckstrom still has a safe attack there. The Commander Speaker attack could signify that Andrew Baeckstrom still has a trick in hand, but we'll see.
Yeah, Funkhouser just figuring out what's going on. He might be asking his teammates what he should be thinking about playing around here. Already seen 1 combat trick from Baeckstrom just in this game, and chooses to block the Commander Speaker, signaling that he's ready to use that trick to off one of Baeckstrom's creatures. The life total's just 4 to 15, and that kind of informing the attacks here. And actually, another Crash the Ramparts, enough to end things there. I think that it took us a while to get the life totals where they needed to be, and it made total sense then why Baeckstrom making that big attack. And, well, he's able to close things out. Even though there was that incredible rearguard action from William Craddock, able to square things up against Corey Burkhart, ultimately Corey's teammates able to get the wins needed to close out the match. And given that Craddock and Burkhart still shuffling, I would be surprised if we would see another game here. Looks like they might still be just playing it out for funsies.
Yeah, sure, why not? That was a great previous game that we saw from these two.
I guess that at this point it's all testing, right?
Yes.
They're still early enough in the day that they're getting a feel for how their various decks go, and ultimately getting the extra information may prove relevant to them, even though we can see that Baeckstrom and Juza have already closed out this match for their team. Given that there's a few mulligans going on, I think that we might actually make the most of the fact that we still have real Magic, if you will, things that impact on teams' abilities to make it to the elimination stages, because we do already have a match win for Baeckstrom and Juza as things stand. We'll be back with our Time Walk match after these messages.